The policy I'm going to discuss is out-of-region use of AFRINIC internet number resources. Just to give a background on the problem that we are trying to resolve with this policy, we can go through the problem statement of the policy, and it's very simple. At the moment, it's not very clear anywhere in our policies whether or not you should be eligible to address space, or if you get assigned eventually, if you should be allowed to use it out of region. Now, just for purposes of clarity, out of region for me means under the RIR system, any geography wherein AFRINIC as an RIR is not designated to serve in. So just this policy, the first thing it tries to do is, yes, it tells you very, very clearly, very explicitly that yes, it is now a legal thing. You can do it without fear. And if AFRINIC staff attempt to actually stop an allocation to you on this premise, it would not be a valid premise. So that's the first thing that the policy clearly states. In my view, I think this is a very, very good thing, because anyone who is from here, who is a member in good standing, who wishes to run some network infrastructure outside of the region, now you have a premise on which to actually seek out allocation from AFRINIC. Now, this is not without condition. This is the primary role of the proposal, but then it goes ahead to actually prescribe under what mechanism you can actually use this IP space out of the region. The premise is very simple. We have situations now that we have made it legal for our resources to be used out of the region. We anticipate, and we are speculating, that there will be individuals or organizations who will be keen on actually abusing the space. So taking it out, now it's legal, I can use it wherever I please. Would like to make sure that when you take this address space, first of all, you're properly a member and you're going to use it in accordance with the best interest of the community. That means to promote, build and promote infrastructure that in one way or the other benefits the community. So to this end, the policy actually seeks to put a limit. First of all, it says if you're going to use this address space out of the region, first, you must use it within the region. So you cannot say, I am a member of the community of the AFRINIC service region, but then I'm running business elsewhere exclusively. No, it cannot be that way. We're just saying, if you're going to run your business in Europe, there must be some business that you're running here. So any use of address space outside shall be preceded by use on the inside. So you must be doing something here for us to let you use it outside. The next thing that we say you should be doing is, as you go about building your network infrastructure, you should use at least more of that IP space in region than you do out of the region. And for this purpose, we have a limit of 40%, so that should be the upper limit of how much of address space in use at any given point in time should actually be used outside the region compared to what should be used in the region. The premise for it and the background is simple. If you say you're an African service provider and you're building network infrastructure for Africa, you should be, at least to an extent, it should be possible that you should be building more, you should be using more of your resources in region than you do out of region. So that's the main, that is mainly the summary of the proposal. Now, I'll go ahead to just run through one or two things that has been said in terms of, first of all, from what I've seen on the mailing list and the analysis that our registry has also put in place. So the registry has done an analysis in terms of figuring out if this policy can be enforced or if there are any issues they would like to see addressed within the policy. One of those is the reservation they came about with how to police the non-LIRs. I think it is a valid concern. I have taken note of it, and I think, yes, in light of this, we can limit the policy to only LRIs. Where I'm coming from is any individuals who are not taking space for commercial purposes, if they're not going to reassign them, if they're not going to give them to third parties, they are, in my view, less of a risk on two fronts. One, if the space belongs to you and as an organization and you're going to use it for your internal purposes, you can only ask for so much space because that's what you can justify. And then secondly, we are more worried about individuals who are actually intent on actually using our address space for commercial purposes by assigning or allocating it to other individuals. So to this extent, I'm fine with revising the policy to make sure it only applies to the LRRs. This will be one of the things that I'll be happy to discuss if anyone has any second thoughts or opinions on this. But my position, based on the assessment from AFRINIC, is that yes, I'm fine restricting the policy only to the LRRs. The second thing that the AFRINIC has suggested is that we explicitly within the policy try and prescribe exactly what should happen if an individual should be found in breach. So they say, my policy explicitly says that AFRINIC staff shall have the discretion using whatever means is available to them and whatever means is within our current system to actually assess any abuse and actually react to that abuse. My particular view on this is that yes, we could go ahead and do this, but then as a policy author, I was trying to make sure whatever I author in this policy is consistent with everything we have in the previous policies and in all of the other documents that we have. So to that extent, I wanted to separate this part of the policy from that component of how AFRINIC goes ahead to do its job. Not that it is not documented, it's just there in several other policies, and in the services agreement, it's there, it's known that if you're in breach of any of AFRINIC's, of any of the policies or procedures that actually assign you addresses, then there is a way for AFRINIC to go there's a process for AFRINIC to go about it. So I don't want to reinvent the wheels, I'm just saying those policies shall apply when you are in breach. This is something I'm also open to discuss, but that is my personal view on this. The other thing that I've gotten from the assessment and from some of the discussion is whether or not this policy should apply retroactively to the past allocations. So if someone has gotten an allocation in the past, should they be subjected to this particular policy? My view on it is probably yes, and I'm saying I'm open to discuss and probably even change this, but my view is the individuals who have address space and it comes from the past, if they should be in a position where they can abuse it, then I think it merits that the policy should only apply to them. So those are my views. That's a summary of 3 of the most important points. There's a few other things that has been mentioned on the mailing list discussions, some of which I've already agreed to incorporate into the policy, but I'll be happy to discuss them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Douglas, and thank you for not using the slide. It was difficult to at least, anyway. However, I'm just going to quickly run through the, for information of those who are here, to run through this staff analysis of this proposal. You're seeing some of them there, and so I don't need to read them. It's just to actually stay a little bit on each of the pages so that you see what the analysis are. It's also on the website, by the way. A few, hang on. Yeah. So we do have I pass? Yeah. So these are the discussion points we do. Of course, this is just something we just added. You could definitely have other things to say. So on that basis, I think the floor is open. I will ask, yeah, Jan.
Yeah, George, random guy from the community, no hats. Can you go to the F F section? Yeah, this one. So this policy shall apply to past. Retrofitting. It sounds at least very unusual, if not a bit dangerous, and very resource heavy to go and in the past and try to reclaim address space that is not fitting this policy. I don't know. I'm just expressing my concern about applying to the past allocations and assignments. I don't know. Maybe we should put this for the discussion, but it's highly unusual to me that this is in there.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. You are not the first person who has said you're opposed to this. I mentioned already that I'm neutral on this. I would like to see if there's any other different voices on the subject. If there's none, definitely I will consider dropping it. Thank you.
Okay.
What I would suggest here, maybe if AFRINIC can go and do the Sander, how do we call it in RIPE region? The risk analysis, impact analysis on this applying to the past. What would that mean for AFRINIC? Thank you.
Okay, Professor Ni, Dr. Ni.
Thank you, Chair. I think the document I read made reference to there being no explicit limits and therefore staff arbitrarily decide. I beg to differ. I believe this may not be true. Staff are guided by ICP2, RFC 2050, 7020, and that define R to cover region, and they allocate for global network. So if network spans beyond region, then they go to other RR. The principle is aggregation rules and minimum size allocation of the other region. It's not based on percent, it's based on need, and percent tends to hide the need. If we want to put explicit limit, it really should be based on aggregation and minimum size. Also, this minimum size changes, so it's difficult to put in policy, in my opinion. Besides, you are uncovering a contradiction. On the one hand, the motivation is that staff are arbitrary, yet you are asking the same arbitrary staff to enforce in an arbitrary way 40%. So I think it's difficult. I just wanted to point this out.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more comment before I ask Douglas to respond. Alan.
Hello, Alan Barrett. I had 3 comments. I hope you'll allow me to make them all. The first is, when I read the policy, I saw no distinction between LIRs and end users. However, in Douglas's presentation, he suggested that they might want to restrict it only to LIRs. My opinion on that is we should have the same rules for both, because if there are different rules, it encourages people to game the system by trying to do something to get themselves classified in a particular category which helps them. I think if we have the same rules for both categories, then we're not going to have a problem with people trying to game the system in that way. On the general principle, I think it's true that the current policies leave it unspecified, and I think it's okay to try to specify what the limits are going to be, and I think 40% is a reasonable number. If you really are an African organization, but you've got equipment at some exchange points in some other countries, or maybe you've got a few customers in other countries, but you're mostly African, I think it will not be an undue burden to stick to that 40%. However, if you are a truly multi-continental organization, then you will probably not fit within the 40%, and you'll be forced to get some address space from other RIRs, and I think that's okay. Then on whether it should be retroactive, definitely not. You can't go back to old assignments or allocations and try to reclaim them. However, you can say that if you come back for more space, then the 40% applies to your total of all space in the past. So if you never come back for more, you keep what you've got, it's fine. But if you do come back for more, then you can say the 40% applies to the total. Okay, and then, sorry, it seems that I have 4 comments, not only 3. On the enforcement side, I don't think we need to spell it out in the policy. It's specified elsewhere that assignments or allocations have to satisfy the reason that they were given in the beginning. And if you get space and you use it in a way that's different from what you said up front when you applied for the space, then it's no longer valid, and the staff or the RIR can reclaim it. That said elsewhere, it doesn't have to be repeated here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alan. If I can summarize what you said, is that you are okay with everything with the exception of maybe 2 things, that is applying it both to end users and LIRs, 1, and then trying to figure out a better way of applying it retrospectively. That means by doing the calculations when you return for subsequent allocations. On both of them, I think I find them reasonable suggestions. I will definitely consider them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's still one more thing on the enforcement part. Yeah.
Alan, just if I understood what he said he was okay with the status quo in as far as how I laid out the policy.
Okay. All right. If Alan is okay by that, that's fine. Can you comment on the first question?
Doc, I didn't comment on Doc's because perhaps his most important point was, again, Alan touched on it just now. Doc's suggestion that the problem that maybe there might be a flaw with the problem statement. I think that there is a valid problem statement, and in as far as allocation on out of region, not everything, just out of region is concerned, it's not absolutely clear to staff, and it's important that a policy be put in place that actually spells it out. So I feel that this policy is right for that, and this is my personal assessment. If I had Alan right, he was also on the same page with this. I'm open to hear suggestions from other members on the team. That is my position. Thanks.
Andrew, thank you. Andrew, before you continue, may I just ask that we follow may I define a certain way of actually commenting? Please, please mention your name, your affiliation, and do start by indicating whether you support this proposal as it's written, or you support but with the following additions, right? If you do not support it at all, please also give reason why you don't support it at all. So after you introduce yourself, please state, I do support this policy, but if you do support the policy as it's written, then you don't need to say any other thing. If you do support the policy, but you would like to see some more edits, please specify the edits, and we'll take note of that. Thank you. Andrew, you can continue.
Hi, Andrew Alston. For the purposes of the PDP, I represent Liquid Telecoms and my own personal views. I support the intent of the policy. I do not support the policy in its current form. I hope that's clear enough, Chair.
Yeah, that's fine.
My first issue with this policy is that it refers to out-of-region space and out-of-region use. At current, this community has no definition of out-of-region use. That leads to ambiguity. If we wish to use the term out-of-region in any policy, we need a clear, concise, and indisputable definition. Else, it will lead to arguments, ambiguity, and potential problems. So that's my first comment. I also think that I need to echo what Ni Kweno said, because it means that people who have applied for space and are using it outside are suddenly bound by new restrictions on past allocated space. However, I also acknowledge that saying that only new blocks will have this policy applied to them could potentially create a headache for staff, because they've then got to go back and they've got to work out what was past, what was present, and it becomes very, very cumbersome. So I acknowledge an issue there, and I'm not saying I have a solution to it, but I do think it needs to be addressed. I'd also like to see that the 40% number there, I'd like to know where that number came from, because I think in all of these things, while we debate numbers, etc., and percentages, there needs to be justification behind those numbers, strong justification. And I point back to...
Andrew, can you summarize, can you round up, because the queue is long.
So the final, this is my final point. I point back to the issue of the soft landing policy, which was delayed by years a lot over the debate on that number. So if we're going to define a number, let's define where that number comes from and what the motivation behind it is. That's my comments.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, Paul Chen, the Vice President from CCSI, China Comms Service International. Well, our company is under the China Telecom Group. Currently, we are working with Mr. Lu, Cloud Innovation, closely to build up a new data center in South Africa, in which will be our first own data center in Africa, and we are in plan to expanding many more in future. However, current notion of policy development in this region concerns me very much about our future investment here in this continent. We'd like to see an open, transparency policy in which welcomes everybody to invest in Africa. Company like us with 17 subsidiaries in Africa continent, $10 billion in revenue. We have already heavily presence in Africa and plan for future expansion. If a policy that was not clear, as well as might involve a protectionism, would create a great concern for a company like ours. Therefore, create concerns for our future investment in Africa. As everybody here might agree, our investment in Africa not only benefits the local economy, creating jobs for hundreds of thousands of people, but also greatly promote the future development of Africa internet overall. So I'd like to say we disagree with the notion the policy created and the direction the policy was moving towards with. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So you simply saying that you do not support the policy because it does not allow you to be able to invest in Africa. Is that what you're saying? That's a summary of what you're saying, right?
No, the reason, you can say that, but the reason we like a policy be open.
Be open.
And transparency. This is what I concern.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, please, we actually are supposed to have finished this session, but we're going to take all this at the expense of our lunch. So please take note of that. We are not going to change the lunch time. However, we can continue here. So the faster you finish, the better for us all. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I find Mr. Cheng's contribution quite generic and does not apply particularly to my policy. So I'll leave that to the chair to respond to him. I'm going to respond to Andrew. The first thing I believe you raised is that of the absence of a definition for out of region. That is taken. I will make sure we get one. The second thing I think I heard you say concretely is ask where the 40% is coming from. The 40% is just saying we should have more in region than we do have out of region. And the easiest way, the closest, the sanest way and closest to a balance for me is 40-60. 50-50 will be, let's have the same in and out, which makes it a plain field for both. And I think the closest to skewing it on the in-region use, which does not compromise out of region, is 40-60. The other question is I think you insinuated that maybe there might be some issues with AFRINIC staff's ability to actually implement. This I cannot answer for. Probably I'll let the chair or AFRINIC staff respond. Please, Nishal.
Hi, it's Nishal, speaking as a member of the community. While standing in line, I was unfortunate enough to have most of what I was saying taken away by Andrew and Alan.
Sorry, Nisha. I think you did not, your name, your affiliation, and what you have, your view about the policy. Do you support, against, support with edit, then continue? Thank
Hello,
you.
my name is Nishal. I am a member of the community. I do not support the policy in its current format. However, I support the intent of the policy. Most of what I was about to say was said in line, while I was in line, by Andrew and Alan. And rather than sit down, since you've already assumed that a +1 is better than people not saying anything, I'd like to add a +1 in the interest of time to what Alan and Andrew said. I think you need a strong definition of what out of use is before you start to identify or where you're going to go with this policy, and at least the things about the numbers are not going to make sense. That said, I still think that it's an important policy, and I'd be happy to support you to develop this.
Thank you. Just go ahead.
Sander Stefan, RIPE Address Policy Co-Chair. Not having any opinion on the policy itself, I just want to raise a point. Is there any risk that introducing this policy here will create a gap between the different regions, that some organizations may not be able to get the resources they need because they don't qualify under any policy in any region? So please keep in mind, if you put limitations on resource usage like this, that there's not a gap for some organizations.
Sorry, what do you mean by gap? What do you mean by some organizations? Is it organizations outside of the region or organizations?
You're limiting the way resources can be used. So this might create a situation where somebody needs resources for business, does not apply to the AFRINIC policy, but also doesn't apply, for example, to the RIPE policy. And then they are in the gap between two policies and they can't get the resources they need.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have, through the RIR system, enough mechanisms for people to get IP address spaces in the various RIRs. My view on this is that if I were an African operator and I were expanding outside of Africa, I have AFRINIC resources and I can use up to 40% of it outside of the region. My view is that after that point in time, I should be eligible to get IP address space from ethnic or any other RIR to use in those regions. So I don't view it as going to disenfranchise members who would like to expand internationally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Remco van Mook, private internet citizen, and I do not support this policy, even though I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to achieve. My main problem with this policy is it revolves around the term in use. And that term in use is artificial, ambiguous, and unenforceable in the way it's written down here. So you're setting yourself up for a huge amount of trouble in trying to police this, because there is absolutely no way you can establish whether in use in any place is actual in use or just fabricated in use. And you really don't want to end up in that discussion, which is also the reason why allocation policy doesn't mention in use so much, but talks about assigned space. So I'm sympathetic again to what you're trying to achieve. I think this is the wrong way to go about it. Thank you.
Sorry, can you go back to the mic? Do you have a, so you don't support it, but you like it, you support the intent, but is there any specific?
I'm sympathetic to the intent. I do not support the policy. I do not think it can be rewritten in a way that it will actually fly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nee.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Nee Kweno. I'm associate of Ghana.com, which is an LRR. I do not support the policy, nor do I support the intent of it. We make allocations, assignments and so on based on need and only need. And if you want IPs, you can go to the other regions to get it. If you want to change it, then do a global policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Raz Biraman, je suis CEO de IPI9, qui est un ISP.
I'm a CEO from Gabon. I'll start by saying to say that I give my support to the spirit of this policy. However, I think that there are terms which should be clarified. The first thing I would like to say is that today we have this policy and we have a big debate because we are reaching the end of the addresses IPv4. If we were all having IPv6, there wouldn't be that question. My first recommendation is for this policy to restrain that to IPv4. The second stake of this policy is that we have to all of us to say that today we have a lot of organizations and companies in our company, because it be it AFRINIC, and it concerns the interests of our community, which are not yet ready, who don't have the capacity to be ready for IPv6. I am telling you a reason. I am in the process of changing my network. I was sad to know that the only devices which my budget could allow me to negotiate were not IPv6. For more than 3 years that I have been with AFRINIC, they say that a good practice is to have public IPv on my device. So I am confronted to a difficulty. How do I develop today? Because we're already talking about it here, on my network, but I might not be able to find an address to go there, to reach there. If I were IPv6, there wouldn't be any problem, but there's not a lack of address. I have to be on IPv4 at the moment. I need addresses. So if there's a risk that tomorrow I might not be able to deploy on the continent devices which might evolve from IPv4, I wonder if the contribution which I'm giving to the community is not enough for me for the development of my organization. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Are you done?
And,
So can you be fast about it?
Est-ce que vous pouvez être un peu plus... The third point is going to be quite fast. I do believe that we have to define what is out of the region J'ai une proposition. I have a proposal directly. When we are doing business, we are based in a country. When we are working in another country, either we have another representation or a subsidiary which is registered in that country. So if we need resources to use that in that representation, we address ourselves to that RIR of that region to obtain addresses. I would finish it. Indeed, the 40% number is a bit arbitrary. I wouldn't go towards a percentage, but to define really what is out of region, if we don't define that, we don't meet those conditions, that's okay.
Yeah, so I got some to especially I want to make comment about restricting this to IPv4. Yeah, so this is restricted to IPv4, as you can see in the summary of the proposal itself. And I believe some of the other things that you mentioned is something that has been taken note of by the author. Please go ahead, Lou.
Lu Hen from Cloud Innovation. I'd like to make a few comments here. First one, I'd like to echo Andrew and what Alan said. Like, we really need to have a very clear definition what is outside region here. Without such definition, as a business in Africa, we would like, as an international business investing in Africa, we like to know if our business itself, if it's impacted or not. Without such clear definition, we will be very concerned about such policy. That's number one point. And I'd like to mention a few other points is the international business coming to Africa, they increase the demand for the international fiber. They promote local infrastructure. They also promote local business and jobs. So I do not support the notion of this policy to begin with. I believe such policy create a protection and create a war for Africa communicating with outside. As it is in the global economy, such notion is actually not good. More communication, more trading is actually beneficial for this continent. This is the right way to go. It's not going the opposite, like saying we want to close the door to everybody. It's not that way.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou. Next person.
Henry from China CCS. Yes, I agree with Lou's opinion, and I'm against the proposal. Yes. And in fact, we China CCS have some 17 subsidiaries in Africa, and why we're here is because we want to make sure the policy or the proposal don't influence the investment in the project here, because we will construct some data center and some IDC project here. And in fact, I think some opinion in the proposal is not, in my opinion, it's not good. For example, it says that the AFRINIC staff can use whatever means to evaluate IP replication. I think if it's not, maybe it's not a proper example. If someone hate me, he said, yes, I will deny your IP application. So I don't think it's a very reasonable one. Yeah. And there's another one is that the policy can be used to allocate the past, now, and future IP. I think it's a little dangerous because, yeah, if a new proposal, a new policy can turn over the forward policy very easily, it's not reasonable.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. So just before you go, you are saying you do not support the policy, but you seem to also be addressing some points, some important points in the policy that you think that you could, if perhaps they are addressed, will you be able to support the policy?
Yeah, I can tell you why, because you see we will build a data center here, and
okay.
Yeah, and in fact we have signed a very big contract with the Burundi's.
All right,
the project FTTX.
All right, that's
IP address.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I see. I'm going to close the queue now. If you think you have something to say, please go line up now so that I can take note of that. In 3, the queue will close. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So please go ahead.
Ok, merci. Ali Haji, Comore Telecom.
Thank you, LIG Telecom. I would like to, first of all, I'm not too sure if my memory is good, but the first region which launched an IP address it was in Asia, as far as I know. Africa, AFRINIC has not yet declared that there is a lack of address in Africa, so as far as I know. This would mean that the present policy that we would like to set up, it's opposed to the general interest. In seeing what we are living today, we know that in the other regions are coming here to get address, but internally, if we want to, we are developing a new policy which are going to say that we're going to attribute that percentage-wise obligatory that will have will not will go in within the general interest. So, according on that point, I am against that new policy which we want to set up because it doesn't respond to the general interest, but on the contrary, to my opinion, it's going to favor of the black market, which is goes against the general interest. Thank you.
Douglas, do you have comments?
Yeah, I will answer the gentleman from China Telecom. This I will leave for chair. I don't think the gentleman, I think you raised two valid points, if I recall what you said. The first thing is you suggested that how staff administers allocations and assignments is arbitrary because maybe you've seen this word in my policy. No, it's not. They're not currently doing it arbitrarily. What I'm saying is the status quo will remain. Alan has put some clarity on this earlier. I'm just saying I do not wish to define new set of criteria by which addresses will be allocated. The second point you mentioned is the retrospective application of the policy. This has already been covered and commented on by both Alan and Andrew. I think it will be changed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to perhaps summarize what the gentleman that spoke last said, is that he feels, based on the interpretation, that it doesn't support the policy on the fact that he thinks that it's explicitly handling the resources to be used out of region. So because of that, he thinks that all our IP resources should be used in Africa, and because of that, it's not supporting. All right, Andrew, I don't know how come you made it to the front. I haven't heard. That's a joke, by the way. But please, I would really like ask that you kind of, if what you're going to be saying is in relation to what I've been said before, a +1 will be very, very helpful at this point in time, so we don't actually exhaust all the lunchtime. Go ahead, Adu.
Chair, I will be brief. Firstly, Andrew Alston, the hats I stated earlier still remain. I stated earlier that I support the intent of the policy but not the wording, and I need to revise what I have said. Having listened to many comments at the mic, my opinions have shifted and I no longer support this policy in any form. I need to raise a caution. As we go forward, sooner or later, AFRINIC is going to run out of space, just as the other regions have. And there are proposals to allow space out of region, transfers, everything else. I have a fear that when we get to the point where we need space from out of region through any means necessary, having implemented this policy, the African continent could be facing a backlash. We are a global community, and I fear that we have acted outside of the global interest, which could come back to haunt us. And as such, I think we need to be very careful. I'd also like to bring to the attention of the community that there is a policy currently under proposal in ARIN, which says, take all your space. So long as you are using 1/24 in the region, what you do with the rest of it is up to you. I would support a policy like that. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Andrew, for that comment.
Just one thing for Andrew. Would you be in favor of a modification that would allow for inter-area transfer? If that way in place, would you support this policy? So something like that or the equivalent?
I would need to see the proposed modification before forming an opinion on that. It's the question, I find the question too vague, and I'd need to see the wording before I commit to anything.
Thank you. Mark?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Elkins. I own and run an ISP in South Africa. That is the hat that I'm wearing. On the mailing lists, I was very much in favor of this policy, even happy to go to a 50-50 type ratio. Listening to the wisdom that has been given at this microphone, I believe it's something that's impossible to police, and therefore we shouldn't try and open this can of worms. So as it stands at the moment, I would not support this policy any longer.
Thank you. Not even with edits, right? Thank you.
Hello. This time I'm wearing a hat for the consulting firm for the China Communication Service.
You've got quite a lot of acts, right?
Everybody do. I'd like to add in behalf of China Communication Service that because we are planning building a data center in South Africa, and we're communicating with a lot of customers, potentially, especially in China, and they are very much concerned in investment because such kind of policies. So such kind of policy might affect the job and economic growth here. That's number 1 point. Number 2 point here is I would like to, actually Andrew just repeated, I like to echo it, and I like to provide some numbers for it. There are still 50 million IP addresses here left in this continent. That's equal to about /3/8, in which in the IPv4 transfer market, in AFRIN region alone, in legacy space, there's over 3/8 for sale at this moment. And we're expecting run out in the next 5 years. After 5 years, China Telecom and Indian Telecom will deploy IPv6, in which they will have huge chunk of IPv4 space left unused. So deploying such policy just preventing such a small amount of IP addresses is really meaningless by any notion at all. So I'd like to just make this point clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Karrenberg. I'm not a member of the African Internet community, so whether I support this policy or not doesn't matter, so I won't say. I will say for the record that I'm sympathetic to the intent. However, I've been involved with address a number of related policies from the very start, and I'm concerned about the stability of the whole system of internet policies worldwide, and therefore I need to repeat what other people said, so there are plus ones. What's needed first, before we even discuss anything else, is a good definition of what out of region or used outside the region means. If you can't write that down, the whole house of cards tumbles. And I think you would be well advised, if you want to progress this policy, to pursue, first of all, before doing anything else, a good definition of that. And then, once you have that definition agreed, to ask the AFRINIC whether they can implement this definition, so whether they can actually make the executive decisions or the operational decisions on yes or no inside or outside the region. And I think all the rest of the discussion is irrelevant before you have done that.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, Vladimir Kangin from company IPTP Networks. We are a global internet service provider and entering African market. This policy I rejected on the mailing list long time ago. I believe, first of all, this kind of policy, if it would be accepted, it shall be done by all RIRs all over the world. So because the rules supposed to be the same for everyone. Moreover, the out of region, it cannot be defined in my view, because it can be defined in a way what kind of business you do. Because potentially some specific businesses requires majority of the IPs to be out of region.
Okay.
And another specific businesses is basically requires to all IPs to be inside and no one need to be outside. So then you cannot talk about any percentage. It's 90, 10 or 50, 50. It doesn't work at all.
Okay, thank you.
That's one point. And,
one point. Can you be brief on the other points? Very, very brief, please.
Very brief.
Yes.
Simple as it. If someone, for instance, we have some customers which are doing anonymizing services, and they basically use tunneling and VPN services. So those customers, they basically use IP address, which is dynamically allocated from the space to the site of the customer.
Okay, so I get the point. You're basically explaining the business cases, the business scenarios. I think that's fine. We've taken note of that. That there are different business scenarios that could determine what is percentage, whether percentage or not. We've taken note of that. Thank you very much.
I would like just to add a couple of things which I believe quite simple, but all regions finding some extra resources and allowing to add another /22 to the members of their regions. So I don't think it will happen anything else with Africa, and you also will have some reserved spaces to be used. And what you're trying to protect now, it could only damage the business to the legitimated companies in the region.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, please go ahead.
You want to?
Yeah, by the way, please don't be surprised you're seeing Andrew on the queue. It's because he said he needed to respond to a particular comment that was made on the floor. And I've given him that express approval, maybe because he's now board member. Anyway, that's a joke. Please, go ahead.
Ok, je vais parler en français.
I'm going to speak in French. My name is Grégoire Amine from Benin. I don't give my support. I don't accept this policy because it gives the impression that Africa is going to sell 40% of its resources. What we have to ask is, what do we see from the other regions?
Thank you.
Hi, Andrew Alston here again. I just needed to distance myself from what Lou said I said, because I didn't. I never ever stated in any way, shape or form that the amount of IP addresses were inconsequential. I felt that that misportrayed what I said, and I need to distance myself from it and categorically say that I did not say what he said.
Okay.
I said.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much for the disclaimer. All right. At this junction, we can see it was a good discussion at the expense of our lunch. Thank you very much for all the comments. It's very important to also note that there are quite diverse views about this. Obviously, there obviously needs to be a lot of things that may need to be clarified, especially the out of region, making definition about the what out of region means, and observing that there is quite a number of people in this room who actually would like some things to be clarified before perhaps that will influence their decision in future. It is on view of this that we, the co-chairs, have actually concluded that there is no consensus for this particular policy, and we would like to send it back to the mailing list for further discussion. Thank you.
I just have one announcement that's totally unrelated to anything else. I left my charger there last evening and it's not there anymore, so if anybody has a Mac charger with a UK plug that came from that plug, please find me. Thank you.
So we resume at 2. Is that correct? 2. Yeah, thank you.